What sports bettors call correlation is actually two completely different effects, but when used properly, both can unlock massive profits. So let's walk through it. Correlation is a statistical measurement that expresses the extent of which two variables are related. Essentially, what you're measuring is how much does a change in one variable move the other variable. And correlation, and you'll hear this, correlation isn't causation. Correlation is just looking at the data. Causation is an effect which will show up in a correlation study. The height of the US Olympic sprinting team and the stock market in Europe. For whatever reason, out of randomness, they could show in a correlation study to have some strong correlation. You know, the height of the US Olympic sprinting team is not causing a change in the European stock market, even though in the correlation study, they have a positive correlation. And if you think that correlation is used incorrectly in the real world, in the betting world, it's used as even a bigger blanket statement. What seems to be the accepted use is correlation means any two events that when put together in a parlay should have a reduced payout. And it's not necessarily even wrong to think of it this way, because as sports bettors, that's what we care about. A lot of the biggest wins that I've ever had and that other professional gamblers, specifically sports bettors, have ever had come from a situation where the sportsbook had a fundamental misunderstanding about the correlation of an event, and you could exploit that for large amounts of money in a parlay. Now, at the beginning of the video, I said that what people think of as correlation in sports betting is actually boiled down to two key effects that help us make money. Effect number one is uncertainty. I like to call it Schrodinger's parlay, and we'll circle back to that. You can think about why I call it that. We can look into the case of Thomas McPeak. He recently got national media attention because he used this exact technique, this exact effect, to make over $800,000 in winnings from Caesars. And unfortunately, the reason that he's in the news is Caesars is, as of recording this video, trying to refuse to pay this genius sports bettor.
I'm holding theoretically, or what should be, $800,000 in my hand.
You went in with $30,000.
Roughly over the course of 1 week-ish.
And your wins were $350,000?
$350,000.
Okay, so McPick's strategy was as follows, and it was a genius strategy. Before the football season started, Thomas McPeak went around and placed, I imagine, hundreds and hundreds of parlays across many different sportsbook kiosks. He would take a team, let's call them Penn State, and he would parlay Penn State to win week 1 or beat the spread week 1 with their look-ahead lines for week 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can do this for college teams, NFL teams. Now, most places won't allow you to do this, and you'll figure out why. What he would do is he'd be like, Penn State, win week 1, win week 2, win week 3, win week 4, win week 5. Parlay them all together on a ticket. Okay, this is interesting because I think intuitively we understand that this sounds kind of like a good bet, but it's hard to explain why. If Penn State wins week 1, they don't get an inherent advantage in week 2. They don't get more points. They don't get to use an extra player. They don't get to have a bye week. But you would be right in thinking this deserves a payout reduction. And the reason why this deserves a payout reduction is because uncertainty is beneficial for long odds parlays. And what Thomas McPeak is harnessing here is the uncertainty around how good or how bad of a team Penn State is. And that uncertainty is the highest at the beginning of the season when there's a wide range of outcomes of the true skill of the Penn State football team. When a football team goes into the season, right, there's a lot of disagreement about how good they actually are. And you'll see a lot of teams that you thought were going to be great do poorly, and a lot of teams that you thought were going to be bad kind of be those dark horse surprise teams, and you realize, hey, they're actually pretty good. And at the beginning of the season, you have basically the lowest confidence in what you predict the skill of the team to be. But as the season goes on and you collect data and you see, this team beat that team and they beat them by this much and their quarterback is now injured or not injured, you start to see the teams play. Now your range of how good or bad they can be starts to close as you collect more data. At the beginning of the season, though, it is the widest range, and that's why this play works the best when you're betting at the beginning of the season when there's a wide range and there's a ton of uncertainty. Okay, so let's say they came into the season and the median kind of rank that the sportsbooks thought they'd be is around 15.5. They had a 25% chance of being a top 5 team, and then they had a 25% chance of being between 15 and 5, and then they had a 25% chance of being 15 to 25, and then they had a 25% chance of being worse than 25. So this is all made up, but it just highlights how you have to think about the actual there's a range of values for the true skill of anything in sports betting, a team, a player, whatever. It's not necessarily one fixed value. You're trying to predict that value, and that true skill is a distribution of values. So that Penn State team, when the season starts, we have a wide distribution of what their actual skill is. And, those are the 4 buckets we're using for now that, top 5, top 15, top 25, and 25 or worse. And we're just going to assign equal probabilities to each bucket to best highlight this point. All right, let's quickly break this down using some numbers and using the help of this handy little Excel table that is either here or here, because I don't know where Nurk is going to cut that into the video.
I think I'm going to put it to the right.
Let's go over the table here. So we have the situation we outlined before. This is, the chances that Penn State is basically going to win their first 5 games, and we're going to do it against the spread. So if you look at the table, you see, okay, the percent chance column, it just means, they have a 25% chance at the beginning of the season of actually being a true top 5 team, a 25% chance of being a top 15 team, but not top 5, a 25% chance of being a top 25, but not top 15, and then a 25% chance of their true skill being an over top 25 ranked team. So I just made up a bunch of numbers. So basically what this table is showing is the probability they win each game if their true skill is in fact top 5, top 15, top 25, and worse than 25. So again, these are made up numbers, and these aren't going to be like realistic to the actual outcome distributions of football. I'm not a football bettor, but what they're going to do is they're going to highlight this concept very clearly as to why you want more uncertainty if you're building a longer odds parlay. So you can see here basically what I'm assuming is that the market thinks that Penn State is right around a 15.5 ranked team. So if they're in that top 15, they're actually going to be beating the spread, more than 50% of the time. So maybe on average about 60% of the time. If they're actually a top 5 team, then they're going to be reliably beating those spreads 80% of the time each. And then you can see as it goes to the other side of that 15.5 line, they start to win against the spread less and less. What you get here is basically under these circumstances, you'd have you take each game, you multiply the chances they win the first game by the second, third, fourth, fifth, until you get in column H the 5 out of 5 chance. That's the chance of hitting the full parlay. So if they're a top 5 team, you're going to hit the parlay, almost 33% of the time. Top 15, you go to like 7.7, 1%, and then basically never if they're over 25. So, and then the EV is essentially what we're doing is we're taking the chance of 5 out of 5 and multiplying it by the chance that they're a top 5 team, a top 15 team. And ultimately, when you add those together, you get the combined probability from all of the possible outcomes, and you get the true probability of you hitting the 5 out of 5 slip, not knowing which bucket they're going to fall into, right? But just assuming it's 25%, top 5, top 15, etc. So here we have the chance of hitting the 5 of 5 at 10.4%. Now, again, this is not actually a real study, but if you were to parlay, a bunch of minus 110s together, I think your parlay odds would be about plus 2,500, right? So, 10% chance at plus 2,500, you're doing really, really well there. Now, this is a situation where you have a high degree of uncertainty. You think Penn State could be anywhere from a outside of the top 25 to a top 5 team. Let's say you play a couple more games in the season and you start to realize, you start to feel more confident about where Penn State is. So we'll bring in this second table, and here we basically are fairly confident they're about a top 15 team. They're right at that 15.5. And all of the win probabilities are the same. We haven't changed anything. But what we've done is we've taken from the extreme. So we've chopped the percent that they're a top 5 team down to about 5%. And we've chopped off the bottom the exact same amount. So we've chopped the probability that they're worse than a top 25 team down to 5%. So you maybe think, okay, well, same thing, right? You've taken the same amount off of the good outcomes as you have the bad outcomes. But this is why this is the power of uncertainty, because the good outcomes matter so much more for your parlay than the bad outcomes. You don't really care about losing the bad outcomes, but you really care about losing the good outcomes. And if you do the exact same exercise with the new numbers, your probability of hitting 5 out of 5 gets cut in half. Even though you did the same, you subtracted the same amount from both the good and the bad, the fact that the range has tightened decreases your 5 out of 5 chances by half, right? In another way, like if you were to increase the range, you would double your chances of going 5 out of 5 while still staying with that exact same median, that exact same mean. This is taking advantage of uncertainty as the true skill or nature of the variable, right? And the wider the uncertainty is, then the more advantage you can gain by parlaying together a bunch of bets involving that team, that variable. And just for the record, one of the most famous correlation topics, I think in all of that I've seen, has been golf correlation, which is basically for a long time, at least at like Underdog and Prize Picks, even at Caesars for one fateful weekend, they would allow you to parlay like round scores. So golfer A to shoot under 68.5, golfer B to shoot under 68.5 or over, whatever it is. And people say, oh, it's correlated. But what golfer A shoots, it has no direct impact on what golfer B shoots. The reason why it's correlated, or why it's a good bet, is because you're unsure of to the exact conditions of the course on that day. If the course is really firm and windy that day, then all of a sudden each golfer is more likely to play poorly. So before the day starts, you have this wide range of outcomes of how will the course actually play, and you don't really know. So if you parlay a lot of golfers to all do well or do poorly together, it's the same effect as what Thomas McPeak was doing with his parlays on how a football team would do, not only in their first game, but in their next few games. All right, but quickly before we go to the second effect, I want to make you aware of GP Picks Plus, which is my market crushing top-down betting alert system that runs through my Discord. So basically what the system is it's a model I've developed, uses market information, specifically price movement, but a lot of different variables, and it spits out alerts for over 20 different sports books. Now, there's a lot of top-down systems out there, but I don't know how many top-down systems are spitting out and grading every single alert. We've had over 50,000 graded alerts, and we're running at close to a 4% average ROI, and it's only getting better every month. Only last month I made a bet during the Masters. Anybody who signed up during the Masters, if I didn't have a ROI of 4.5% or higher since the Masters, they got the month for free. I actually don't know the results. I'm recording this before the month is up, but that is how much I believe in this alert system. So if you want to get access to it, go over to goldenpants.com, or I will also drop a link in the description. All right, now let's talk about effect number 2, which is causation. So this is anything where bet 1 has a direct impact on bet 2, and it causes bet 2 to have a higher or lower likelihood of hitting. Causation is widespread in sports. That's because there's many players on the court, on the field. They're impacting their teammates, the other team, and this is mostly known by the sports book. This is one where it's relatively easy to block. So when the QB completes a 50-yard pass, then there is 50 receiving yards that are created. A pitcher gives up a hit is created for the batters on the other team. If a point guard plays the entire basketball game, then there's minutes that are kind of taken off the table for his most common backup. These are all causation effects, and they're correlated because thing one directly impacts thing two. Early on in the underdog in Prize Picks days, you could, without getting a payout reduction, parlay a quarterback to go over their passing yards with multiple of their receivers to go over their receiving yards. And you could even parlay it with the quarterback on the other team and the receivers on the other team to either go over or under, right? And you wouldn't get a payout reduction. Obviously, that has since changed. This is the classic player A impacts player B, but there's another more interesting example that has to do with futures that I've seen pop up still from time to time. Let's say you have a team to win their division, right? And they're in the same division as another team. There's been situations where, and it's not this exact situation every time, but this concept where you could parlay team A to win their division, and then you could parlay team B to maybe go under their season win total. And let's say team A and team B are in the same division. So now they're playing each other. So if team A wins their division and they play the other team a lot, that means that to win their division, they have to beat the other team. So now there's more wins available on the table for team A to win the division if team B goes under their win total. There are times where there will be causation-based futures parlays, and these still come up, and every time it's a little different. There's a little twist, and that's why there's no one single formula to like go do this now, because if there was, they would just block it. So it's when this concept comes up but in a different form, and that's what you really have to start looking for, is these concepts but applied slightly differently than how they've been presented in the past. That is going to be where you can make money using old concepts on new situations. You can think about parlays in two distinct engines in the sportsbook. One is the traditional sportsbook parlay, which this was created a long time ago, and basically what would happen is a sportsbook would either allow you to parlay 2 or 3 bets together, not reduce the payout, right? So like a plus 100 and a plus 100 bet, when parlayed together, would give you a plus 300 bet. That's the actual fair odds. No tricks. They're just going to allow you to smash the 2 bets together. If you have 2 good bets, the parlay will still be a good bet. If you have 2 bad bets, the parlay will still be a bad bet. What makes the SGP different than a regular parlay engine is the SGP engine allows you to parlay stuff that is obviously correlated. You can parlay Patrick Mahomes over passing yards with Travis Kelce over receiving yards. What they do is they take into account and they have a measurement for that correlation, and they reduce the payout accordingly. So let's say that you had that Mahomes over passing yards at plus 100, Kelce over receiving yards at plus 100. You parlay them together. Instead of getting the plus 300 you would get in the normal parlay or the old school parlay system, you might get plus 180, something significantly reduced. And that's to account for the correlation, but to still allow you to parlay the bets. And it really opened up the entire menu of especially player props for parlays, and they've become wildly popular. One of the easiest ways to make money using a correlation-based approach is find correlation where there's no punishment. It's very likely that is a good bet. And the more correlation you think is there, the more likely that is to not only be a good bet, but probably a great bet. The reason that I made the bulk of this video on this one way is because it's something you can go out and do now. You can go poke around the sportsbook's menu and you can try and parlay different bets together that you think are correlated and see if they allow you to do it. Now, 99% of the time, they're going to block it, especially if like a new event opens up. Sometimes their internal IT will not tag something properly, and it'll allow you a situation where you can in fact parlay correlated events. This is going to happen anytime stuff changes up in the sportsbook menu, anytime it's a special event. You should always be checking for this. So that's example 1, and that's something that you can go do now. Now, example 2, it's a little more complicated. The second way to make money using a correlation-based approach is being able to price correlation better than the sportsbook. So this could come in betting against the SGP or the SGP engine, where the sportsbook is trying to price the correlation, but you can find a way to price it better. Actually pricing correlation, like getting a quantifiable value for it, is extremely difficult. And it's especially difficult once you go beyond just a pairwise correlation, which is the correlation between two variables, two events happening, right? Mahomes over, Kelsey over. Okay, well, what's the correlation between Mahomes over, Kelsey over, and Pacheco under rushing yards, right? Once you start to add more and more variables, the problem becomes, it becomes a serious small data problem, and it becomes harder and harder to price that correlation or to quantify that correlation, right? Because it's so hard to price correlation, the sportsbooks are actually still pretty vulnerable with the SGP engine. So, but it's a very specific type of vulnerability. Oftentimes, players will, at a certain position, might be treated interchangeably as maybe a player at that position on another team. What you need to be looking for are the exceptions to the rule. Outlier situations. It could be something in the NBA where there's going to be a blanket correlation applied to a center and a point guard, but there might be a team where it's clear that these two players are either always in the same rotation together or they're never on the floor together, but it only applies to like this specific team. Situations like that, you know, running back and backup running back usage, all of these weird nuances that are maybe these unique situations that might only exist on one team. These are the situations that the SGP engine is going to have a terribly hard time pricing because they frankly don't have the luxury of being super unique in how they price things. They have to have a very robust model that's able to, you know, work for an infinite number of possible combinations, right? The key to the second way to win, and outside of trying to actually quantify correlation better than the sports books, because frankly, they do a pretty good job, is to find situations where the underlying sport, the underlying team, the underlying player differs for some reason from the average player at that position from the average team, but it's being priced like the average team, priced like the average player, and then go ahead and bash the sports book's head in that spot. And the great thing is they like to see SGPs. So of course, like if you have a super obvious SGP angle and you only bet that, they might catch on. But this is a good way, if you find a good SGP edge, to make some consistent money without getting shut down by the sports book, at least for a decent period of time, compared to just winning like straights at prop bets, right? So it gives you a little extra longevity, and it will allow you to make some really big wins, because a correlated parlay, this is something where you could have 100-200% EV on one bet. So if you can load up and smash these spots when they come up, and they're not going to be super frequent, but they're going to be super valuable. So you only need to hit a couple of big spots a year to have it make a huge impact on your bottom line. So another surefire way of knowing you're onto something is if you can't parlay something at like 6 sites, but there's one site you can parlay it at, it's quite likely that that's a mistake on the one site that you can parlay that thing at, and you should just bet it. So I hope this video helped you hit a big correlated parlay, and if it did, you know, or if it didn't, drop me a like, subscribe, and you know, stay tuned, because we'll have a lot more like this coming out. So good luck, everybody, and I will see everybody on the next video.